Hi guys, welcome back to Kevin Nipp, licensed marriage and family therapist. I had received some requests for some videos which I had asked about on Facebook, and so hopefully I'll be able to get to most of them or all of them, but I wanted to start with the idea of coping with difficult situations. And coping mechanisms in particular are sort of like a kind of a funny point for me, because I always think that there's sort of like something underlying and judgmental about coping mechanisms, something kind of disconnected, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And this is something that you can check in with yourself about too, but we live in a world where we tend to judge very easily. We tend to judge ourselves, most of all, other people, situations, and we're sort of encouraged to do that in many places. And a lot of times when people are trying to cope, there's usually kind of like a subtle feeling of that internal judgment happening. Like, this situation is bad, or my feeling is bad, or something that I'm experiencing is bad. And I want to recommend that you take that and just step back with it for a moment and reflect that maybe it's not actually something that's bad, but even if it's a difficult situation, a situation that's challenging, where you don't know the answers, where there's uncertainty or a sense of shakiness, that even though all those qualities are there, that it's actually, there's some sense of emerging wisdom in what's going on. And actually the best thing that we can do is take a non-judgmental attitude to what's happening in the moment. And I guess in like a roundabout way, you could say that I'm recommending a coping mechanism be non-judgment, but I think I'm actually saying having an open, inviting attitude towards whatever feelings are coming up or whatever situation is happening in and of itself is sort of like this whole other thing, right? Because if we're looking at our life like it's this thing that it's terrible, and there's always crap going on, we're always having to deal with it, then like our label of life, our label of everything that's happening becomes kind of toxic and starts to sort of shape everything that we see as negative. Whether that's a conflict with a friend, or disagreeing with how somebody else handles something, or how we ourselves are looking at or approaching a situation. So I know somebody else mentioned, like, well, what if I don't get along with my friend's husband? And I think it's always a good thing to step back and ask, well, why is it that I have difficulty? What is coming up inside me that kind of clashes with that? Do I feel like he takes up all of our time and I don't get to see my friend anymore? Is it that he has some quality that we ourselves struggle with inside ourselves? Like, some people can be really outspoken and kind of crass and just more forward, where sometimes we ourselves are more subtle and subdued, and we find that kind of abrasive. So oftentimes we find that there's a way of operating that's kind of different than how we prefer to, and that is a source of a lot of stress and contention, and that's important to be aware of, like what's coming up inside of us. And I think that's going to be a common theme throughout a lot of these videos too, is really being more aware of what's happening inside ourselves, and learning that we can kind of get more familiar with that. We can learn to take care of that a bit more by being aware. And I think that's actually can be considered good news, right? You get into a difficult situation and you sort of feel like you're kind of scattered, or you're falling apart, or you're on shaky ground. But if you sit with that for a moment and you tune inward and you ask yourself, like, what's that really about? And you pause just to listen, but not to control it, but to listen, oftentimes it'll tell you something. You'll have a sense, or you'll get a notion, just even like asking that question to yourself. You find that answers come almost immediately afterwards. But they won't come if you're constantly trying to cover it up or blame it or push it away. So I think that's very important too. So again, overall on the topic of coping, I think a lot of it has to do with how we relate to our life and what happens inside of us. Because the reactions that we're having inside of us, those are the things that we're dealing with, is our own feelings. Like everything outside, that could be anything, right? That could be the weather changing, that could be a change in the job, that could be a change in family situation, but something is happening inside of us. And starting there is a place of greater wisdom and control. You know, it's sort of like the story of, you can, if the desert is hot and you're walking on the desert, you can cover the whole desert in, I think, leather so that it's not hot and it's easy to walk on, or you can look at your own feet and cover them in sandals. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Again, I'll hopefully get a chance to do another one of these videos very soon, and I appreciate your feedback. Thanks.